Hello! I've done a couple of videos recently on Tangerine Dream's music to Risky Business, and since doing that, I've been made aware of a old controversy that that score is actually a lift in many respects of Steve Reich's music for 18 musicians. So I've been investigating this, and I've been comparing the music from the Tangerine Dream score to music for 18 musicians. It seems to mostly be centered on the track Love on a Real Train, and one particular moment from music for 18 musicians that people hear a real strong similarity. So I'll be going through the two pieces of music and comparing them directly. I've heard various versions of this that I've found on the internet about this controversy, and some people have been commenting on my videos and helping me learn about this. There are different versions of this story. I've heard that Steve Reich was originally asked to score the movie and he declined, and then Tangerine Dream was asked subsequently, and one version has it that they made their own score, but that score was rejected, and then they had very little time to fix the score, and so they ended up using what had been temped in the score, which was Steve Reich's music, because that's what the filmmakers had wanted all along. And so their second attempt was basically just a cover of Steve Reich's music. I have not been able to confirm that Steve Reich was ever asked. I have found other things on the internet. An interview with the editor of Risky Business, who talks about how they hired Tangerine Dream. So we can take a look at that. Choosing Tangerine Dream to compose the main score happened accidentally. Second assistant editor Albert Coleman, now also a picture editor, often listened to the German electronic band in his room next to where Chu was working. The sound of the music caught Brickman, that's the director of the movie, Risky Business, caught Brickman's attention. Chu says, Paul liked what he heard and placed the temp music cues with Tangerine Dream and replaced the temp music cues with Tangerine Dream cuts. The more we tested them behind our cut scenes, the more Paul and John became convinced that Tangerine Dream should compose our score. So in the spring of 1983, Brickman, Abnett, and music editor Sobel went to Germany, where they recorded the score at the band's studio. They returned with cues designed for specific scenes, as well as wildcard stingers, short phrases that could be placed anywhere to boost certain scenes. So, okay, that doesn't sound like Steve Reich had been asked. Now, it's possible that some of his music was in the temp score, and when they asked Tangerine Dream to do the score for them, they may have used Reich as a reference. That's not unusual. But anyway, the only thing I could find about Steve Reich, an actual direct quote from him about this, is a New York Times article from, I believe, the 80s as well. And in this interview, he says he is less happy with some other appropriations. They're talking about how much influence he's had on other music and pop music. And he said, I should be receiving royalties for the theme to Adam Smith's Money World, and the whole soundtrack to the film Risky Business, supposedly by a group called Tangerine Dream, was an out-and-out ripoff of music for 18 musicians. I should have sued. So I've been, investigating this, and let's listen to a little bit of Love on a Real Train. So I have this little piece, and I think this is the melody that is the culprit here, and then we'll compare it to what I think is what people hear as its clear reference or lift, whatever you want to call it, from music for 18 musicians. So this is Risky Business, Tangerine Dream, Love on a Real Train. Okay, so then if we listen to section 5-3B from the soundtrack, from the recording. And you hear that little marimba. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so when I heard that, I thought, yeah, those sound the same. Those really sound the same. And I do have the score. I have the score to Music for 18 Musicians, and this is that section that we just heard. And you can see this is, I think, the main marimba line that we're hearing. There is another one doing kind of in a counterpoint thing above it, but this is what is really standing out. So in Ableton, I've recreated this. So this is both of them together. Both this lower line and the upper line. And then here's just the lower line. And then if we go back to Risky Business, listen to that one more time. Okay, so not exactly the same, but very similar. So then what I did was I kind of mapped it out. And so the Music for 18 Musicians, the Steve Reich piece, that section that we were listening to is an F sharp minor. And it's in 6/4 time. And the notes of the scale, just the scale notes of F sharp minor that we're hearing are the fourth, the flat third, the root, the second note, the fifth note, the flat seven, the second note, the root, and the fifth. And then the Tangerine Dream is in F minor, and the notes of that from that scale are the fifth, the first, the root, the flat seven, the root, and then it goes into this kind of, it's in 4/4, and it goes into these little 16th notes here. So then it goes to the fifth, back to the root, then the root again, the flat seven, and the fourth scale degree at the end. So, I looked at these and I thought, boy, those don't look the same at all. Why does it sound so similar? So I thought, well, maybe, you can hear like a little bit of, let me pull up this keyboard. So the Reich piece, if we hear it in F sharp minor, this last little thing, that's a fourth, right? The distance of a fourth, and you kind of it points back to the tonic. So we hear this, and then we hear the tonic, right? And then the end of the Tangerine Dream, Love on a Real Train, that's an F minor. But the very last two notes are also the distance of a fourth. Even though they're not the same, they're not a root to the fifth note of the scale, they're the flat seven to the fourth note of the scale. But it's still that same interval distance. And that's kind of interesting because the Reich piece with its fifth at the end, the tonic to the fifth, that's almost more classical. Dun, dun, dun. And then this move of the flat seven to the scale degree 4, that's kind of more pop and more film style. So we're in F minor and we go. That's a different kind of cadence, and I would say it's more pop and film score style. But anyway, so I thought, well, maybe that's what we're hearing. And also we have like this kind of evenness at the beginning. You see they both have this kind of even eighth notes, and then it gets syncopated in the second half of the phrase. So that's also a similarity. And then I thought, well, also the contour of the melodies are similar too. So I drew out, like a rough approximation. This is the Reich contour. And then this is the Tangerine Dream contour. So they're similar. Of course, this is shorter because it's in 4/4 and this is in 6/4. But you can see they have a very similar contour. So then I kept going. So I made a recreation of the Love on a Real Train. Well, this is it with all the effects. if we turn those effects off, this is just the line. Okay, so let's just directly compare that. Let's take this line. That's what we just heard. Let's copy that and let's pull that in to the Reich piece and compare them visually. Okay, so here is the Reich melody. And let's just paste this directly in. They're in two different keys, but we can move stuff around. So now we have our Risky Business. I'm going to pull this down a couple octaves just so we can look at them together. Now, one thing that's really cool about Ableton is you can stretch out parts of the grid. So why don't we, they both have this like even thing at the beginning and then a syncopation at the end. Why don't we take the syncopation of the Tangerine Dream melody and stretch it out into 6/4 and see what happens. So we can just stretch this all the way out. So now it's in like 6/4 time, just like the Reich piece. And let's shorten these notes. And now we can see these very similar contours, right? And they both end with this descent of a fourth. All right, well, let's see how similar these contours actually are. So I can deactivate so they look a little different. And then we can just pull them right up. So now the dark notes are the Risky Business notes, Love on a Real Train, and they're in the same key. This is in the same key. That tonic is on F sharp up here. So we see they're different notes, but they're very similar contour, right? And in fact, this would put it into a different key, but if we just want to look at the contour, all but 3 notes are the same intervallic distance between notes. So this is a different key for the Love on a Real Train, but you can tell that the shape is very, very similar. So that's why it sounds so similar to our ear. In my opinion, I think this is fair enough. This is how art works. We were inspired by music that we hear. Tangerine Dream has clearly been inspired by Steve Reich's music. They've taken one little segment of melody from an hour-long piece, and they have manipulated it. They've changed it around a little bit, slightly. They've made various changes, and they put it into their own sound. I mean, they're still staying true to this, electronic kind of minimalist sound that they had been developing. I think Steve Reich has said it best himself, actually, and just after the quote about how he should have sued Tangerine Dream from the New York Times article, right after that he says, "Still, if I had a dime for every trace of the Rite of Spring I've heard in movie soundtracks, I'd be rich," he added. "I don't think imitations will sap the power of the originals. If anything, because of familiarity with the sound, the original will come through more clearly. It will be approachable but particularly engaging, focused and musically cogent. Ezra Pound once said that a classic is something that remains news, and the best work is capable of recreating the context of its times." So I think that's absolutely right. I mean, look, this piece has had a profound impact musically on our culture, and it's inspired all sorts of new music. And this is a good thing. And I think that Tangerine Dream, it's okay. It's okay to, whether they felt like this was a quote, perhaps a little nod to Steve Reich, the influence is very clear, but we got a whole new piece of music out of it. And let's go back to the Love on a Real Train recreation and just kind of look at some of the other elements that make it distinctive and their own. Okay, so here is just that sound, and then we add delay. And that delay looks like this. It's just a dotted eighth note. Pretty simple. and then some reverb. And then there's like this kind of shaker sound. Let's turn that off. Okay, let's turn these off. Okay, so there's this shaker sound, and then there's this kind of bell thing. And then there's this, I think this has got to be this emulator too. I have just a VST version of it, but the female choir really sounds like that. So we can hear that. And then we have this kind of bass. And that's just at the beginning. I mean, there are many layers that they kind of fade in and out. There are all sorts of different elements that they bring in. And the bass generally, if it's here, so we have our F, and then they like to do this a lot. They go down to the flat 6, and then up to the flat 7. And that's also very, filmic, that move from down to the flat 6 and then up to the flat 7 and, back to the tonic. It's also kind of a film sound. So anyway, I think they're both really terrific, wonderful pieces of music, really groundbreaking, both of them, and I'm happy that we have both of them. And I am sorry, if Steve Reich felt hurt or bitter about it, and he has every right to, of course, as an artist himself. But to me, I'm happy we have both, because they're both terrific. Thanks.